Hello, beautiful friends. Today we're going to be talking about Sun conjunct Ketu and specifically in the sign of Virgo. This is a significant one because before we have the solar eclipse on the 21st in the sign of Virgo, we're going to get this conjunction of Sun and Ketu. And where we can start is that, yes, the eclipses always denote endings and new beginnings. But since this conjunction happens right before the eclipse, it's talking something about a surrender before that ending can come about. And only after that surrender, regarding some of those Virgo themes, can something new emerge. But the first thing that we have to do with any kind of symbol in astrology is to understand what each of them mean and then to bring them, to blend them, to see what comes of it. And the first thing we have to keep in mind about the sun is a great stabilizer of our entire chart. It represents the soul, the self, center of being, is the principle of light and clarity, and it's where a sense of authority and power comes from in the chart. And its motion, we can look at it as a center point where it's just radiating outward to its surrounding. So the sun has very much to do with our sense of direction, how we are made visible to others, so we become an identification marker for others. And it also determines our identity, as well as our ego, which is the way we negotiate with the external world. Another component of the sun represents our vitality. So health is very much related to the sun. And if you think about it, the sun is enormously reliable and stable. It rises at the same spot every year on that day, and then it sets at the same place. So it's bringing stability and reliability. On the other hand, we have Ketu. Its motion is inwards, and in essence, it pulls away from worldly visibility and draws us in towards where there is silence. So Ketu comes to be about detachment and letting go of the appearance, the visible, and the external. Ketu is essentially about dissolving what is expressed. It makes the visible into something invisible. So Ketu comes to intensify. Ketu is related to intensification of our inward processes. So as we can see right away, Ketu is coming in relation to the sun, and it's stripping the sun of its external outer symbol of stability. So when the sun meets Ketu at that 18 degrees of Virgo, the light of the self, because the sun represents the self, can't just shine by merely being present. With Ketu there, sun's light has to get filtered through Ketu, which makes it thin out, diffuse. The light of the sun, the self, is reduced. And another way that we can look at this is because sun creates visibility and clarity. It's revealing things to us. When it comes into conjunction with Ketu, that visibility and clarity can start to dissipate. Even our identities can feel a little bit less certain. Like people who have Sun and Ketu conjunct, this is something that they're always negotiating with. Who am I? What am I about? What am I doing? And in many ways, our ego, which is our method and our way of taking our internal self and negotiating with the world, becomes less reliable. And of course, all of this is super uncomfortable. So is the thing attached to my eyelash. And I say this because this conjunction of Sun and Ketu is priming us, is prepping our sense of self to go through a process of release. So it's a kind of an initiation. Yes, Ketu's making us let go of things, and that can be painful, but it's also creating the necessary space for what is trying to emerge and come through. So that death, that ending, is coming through Ketu, but Rahu wants to come through the future, the emergence of something else. So the self, the sun, and those Virgo themes must be surrendered. It has to go through a metaphorical death. Let's just take a minute to also talk about Virgo to understand, well, the self is in the sign of Virgo, so it's dealing with those Virgo issues and themes. What are they? We can start here. Virgo is the sign of the intellect, but in its practical form. It's very practical, systematic, methodical mind or intellect, which includes the way that we make our routines, daily routines, our sense of organization, and the general careful management of life. Virgo represents our daily systems, the way we organize health, work, duties, and practical details that keep our lives in an orderly manner. And Virgo also holds a symbolic meaning of purity. It's representing the way that we manage our lives, our daily lives, gives us a sense of stability and predictability. Like Virgo is the ultimate problem solver. So it's constantly solving problems at the same time setting categories and systems where we can just smoothly and practically move through them. But with the eclipses and with the sun here now, our routines and the way that we show up to our life every day is changing tremendously. And this started to occur when Ketu actually came into the sign. And we've already had one set of eclipses last fall. Now they're just getting super intensified, and we have many more eclipses to come. So there's a purification and refinement of Virgo through all of the eclipses. Like the last time we had a node here was in 2015 when Rahu entered the sign of Virgo and Ketu into the sign of Pisces. So as soon as Rahu moved in, it started to take us into the future of how we were going to systemize our life. But now that Ketu's here, Ketu's saying, you know what, you outlive those systems. Non-applicable, they don't work anymore. They need to be cleared out. They need to be purified. So Ketu's showing us how we have outgrown them and how we need to release them. That's what the surrender here is about. So the sun coming here into a conjunction with Ketu South Node is not just about the self being dimmed, but about those Virgo themes that we apply to our life that creates a kind of a self-preservation. Those are the things that are being thinned out at the moment. And if we pay attention, I don't know about you guys, but life just feels uncomfortable. Like being in one's own life just feels a little bit glitchy at the moment. And that's because we know that the old ways of doing things are not working, but we're clinging onto them because we need something. We need some sort of a system to move through the days. But because it doesn't have an application that gives proper outcomes, we're unable to engage with life the way that we used to, and the way that that engagement gives us a sense of self. And you know, this moment really matters with this conjunction, because while we're learning that, oh my God, I'm not functional, the themes and the routines of my life are not functional, just a few days later, we're going to have a cazimi between Sun and Mercury at 20 degrees of Virgo, which is just days before the eclipse. And we got to remember, Mercury is the planet of intellect and is the ruler of Virgo, and it's where Mercury is exalted. Mercury is about discernment, is about naming things, sorting and organizing them so that they're balanced and they're symmetrical. And on Friday, September the 12th, Mercury will be at the heart of the sun after this conjunction with Ketu. But we have to remember, Mercury is making this conjunction with the sun, with the self. The intellect is connecting with the self, but is not the same self anymore, because the self, the sun, made that conjunction with Ketu. It had to release many things. So the sun and the self has been stripped off of its old ways. One of the things that could be very much affected is our self-concept, because let's say you go to the gym, you're that person who goes to the gym, for example. You're the person who went to the gym and did that, but you can see that maybe you just need to do another sport right now. It just doesn't have the same resonance anymore. So you can't self-define that way anymore. You can't have a sense of identity through it. In a lot of ways, the sun is not sure who it is. We're not sure who we are after this conjunction with Ketu. And what happens here is crucial, because what's left of the self after that encounter with Ketu South Node is the essential substance of the self, things that even Ketu couldn't touch. It goes beyond identity, is the makeup and the core essence of ourself. So when Mercury comes at the heart of the sun is not handing it over some identity that it has built since 2015. The sun is saying, Mercury, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. So it's giving the message to Mercury of what is left of the self. And it's asking Mercury to recode this, to rename this, to sort it out, and to define it once more, once again, for another 9.5 years till we get Rahu back here. And what Mercury is going to do right away after its cazimi with the sun, because the sun had that conjunction with Ketu, Mercury is going to start putting what this self is into words. It's going to start categorizing it, create some sort of a meaning from what's been emptied out from it. And I talk about the significance of meaning with the lunar eclipse in the previous video. So this is an ongoing narrative. If you guys have been watching the videos, we have gone through a stripping process of our meaning. And now we're finding out that the real actual life application of our life don't work. And we need to redefine and create new meanings, which will translate into new ways of being in our life. In general, we can say after the soul, the sun, has surrendered upon that conjunction with Ketu, it hands the new seeds of its being, or the seeds that are pertaining to the essence of its being, to Mercury. And Mercury is going to start building from there. And this is the first cazimi with the sun and the sign of Virgo. We're going to get Mercury retrograding in the sign of Sagittarius in November, and then it's going to formulate that second cazimi, which is a continuation of this, in the sign of Scorpio in late November, December. I'll put the dates below. And we got to remember, the conjunction with Ketu happened before the eclipse. This handoff to Mercury happened before the eclipse. And shortly thereafter, on September 21st, we have the partial solar eclipse in Virgo. And the eclipse will finalize what had begun with the conjunction of Sun and Ketu. So this eclipse is the self, the sun, having to let go of all the previous Virgo structures, which includes the systems of our lives, our routines, and ways of being that once upon a time give our life a sense of order, but order that no longer serves us, an order that must dissipate and dissolve into the body of Ketu and get digested there so that a future can emerge, which we call Rahu North Node. So the eclipse, we can look at it as a symbolic death of the old Virgo self. It's about clearing space. It's about cutting the cord to the old so that a new self and a new way of being that self in terms of its practical application can emerge into place. And I want you to keep in mind that Ketu is not the only one that's doing this. Saturn in the sign of Pisces doing this is doing a lot of detaching and letting go because of its coldness, its objective, rational ways. And I talk about that in the video about the regress of Saturn into the sign of Pisces. And we also have Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, where Cancer represents our internal self. And Jupiter is creating a sense of spaciousness within so that these new routines and ways of life can come into place. So the alchemy of this process is happening in 3 places, not just with Ketu. So it's intense. Like Saturn's showing us our habituated ways, our old meanings, our old definitions don't match our reality anymore. While this eclipse season can feel very painful for some of us, they are setting us free from repeating our past ways of being. And they're freeing us because they're not working anymore. I mean, if it was working, why would you want freedom from it? The past always has this pull on us. It creates these compulsions within us. So this purification process is happening in the sign of Virgo is allowing us to release that now. It's just an uncomfortable pull into a new system. It might feel like the void, but we're actually moving towards a new way of operating. And I say uncomfortable because honestly, change is always uncomfortable. Even the ones that we intend to make, once when we're in the routine of it, we'll see that it requires a lot of discipline, dedication, sacrifice. So it's challenging. And I want to touch on Saturn again, because this eclipse happens at the 29-degree mark of Virgo. And where is Saturn sitting? On the opposite side of the axis in Pisces at 29 degrees in its retrograde motion, where Saturn moved there on September 1st. Again, there's a video on that if you guys are interested to understand what Saturn's trying to do there. So while Ketu here is stripping us off our old routine, so we're losing our sense of self in the sign of Virgo during this eclipse, Saturn, which represents negations, limitations, and detachment, as well as time, is the slow grinding of the current reality. It's dissolving it into the sign of Pisces, into the waters of Pisces. So in Pisces, we're getting the concept of dissolution through Saturn. Both Saturn and Ketu are simultaneously asking us, what expectations are you willing to let go? What old dreams are you holding on to where those dreams cannot hold you anymore? What illusions of stability have you created in your mind since 2015 that need to dissolve because they're just delusional? It's an illusion. It doesn't have an application. Saturn wants a sense of realism from us, and Ketu really wants purification of it so that we can actually set new meaning and new ways of being. So this opposition of Virgo and Pisces and the eclipses is about surrendering false structures, surrendering impossible expectations, the ways that we've been trying to manage ourselves and our life, but it's just been unmanageable. It's about also releasing the old meaning and the sense of purpose that we had given our life. Because I talk about this in the last video, with the lunar eclipse, Pisces has to do with our depth of knowledge. And from that, we create meaning and a sense of purpose in life. In some ways, the old world order and the old order of our life must give way to the new currents of life coming through. In many respects, we can look at Saturn saying, if you want your life to make sense again, for it to feel real, like you as your sense of self is embedded within your life and functional, you need to let go of the old systems that you had put into place. And let's just summarize the story of this eclipse, of the partial solar eclipse in Virgo. First, we're going to get Sun conjunct Ketu. So our sense of self is going to feel very thinned out and misplaced. Then Sun's going to meet Mercury and is going to say to Mercury, dear child, this is what's left of me. I hand it to you. See what you can go and make of it. Sort it, rename it, help me reemerge. And as I said, we're going to see the outcome of this when they have that second cazimi in the sign of Scorpio. But we have to wait until November to December for this. Then we have the eclipse in the sign of Virgo at 29 degrees, where we have Sun and Moon conjunct. And this is the absolute dissolution of our old routines and the death of the self, because the self cannot define itself anymore through its routines, habits, and the way that it was managing its daily life. And the way to look at this productively is that this is an ending, which is an onset for an emergence of a new self and new ways of engaging with life. And just to recap Saturn's reminding us that everything you build in life, including your systems of how you regulate your life, has to come and answer to time. And I am time. I am reality, and there has to be a correspondence to reality. If there is non-correspondence with reality, I'm going to get rid of it. And since I am sitting in Pisces, I'm going to dissolve it in the vast cosmic ocean of the Piscean Sea, where you cannot even find it. And Saturn and Rahu, both of them there, are showing us how the currents of the future are taking us. And we have to go willing, otherwise we'll feel like we're drowning. So in a lot of ways, this eclipse is not just about a reset. It is about the confrontation with our limits. It's the recognition that often renewal begins with us surrendering somewhere, not just fighting to have it. Sometimes we have to surrender. And this includes our habits, but also our illusion of control. Virgo can have a lot to do with control because it's trying to perfect the system. Is trying to control the variables. And everything right now is showing us we don't have control and we have to come to this point of letting go. And the prelude to this entire process is beginning with Sun conjunct Ketu. We're getting primed with that conjunction. It's an introduction to the surrender. We don't have a lot of time because everything's happening in a span of 4 days, but it is a kind of a precursor. And before logging off, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. And if you want a reading from me, the description below will have all the links to that. And a last word, this is a moment to have faith, to have trust in ourselves, trust in existence and in universe. We need to trust that what's dying will reemerge. It will reemerge back stronger and with a greater sense of purpose. And we will find daily applications that will support our present and our future for the next 9 years. That's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.